Since the age of about probably 10 or 11, I've struggled with really heavy and painful monthly cycles. It's just been something that has been kind of a normal, abnormal thing for me my whole life. I'm 45 years old now. I never even really thought in all those years to ask for prayer about that because it just seemed like, just something that was normal for me and something that I was just going to have to deal with. This summer, a couple weeks into June, probably for anybody who lives in the area, you heard about the break-in and stabbing at a home in Rockford. And that was my home and my family that happened to. And so our family was, under deep stress and distress and, dealing with a lot of fear and anxiety and tending, especially to our children who were very traumatized from this. What was going on with me and my body was kind of put on the back burner. In June, the beginning of June, I started what I thought was, just a normal monthly cycle, turned into several weeks. But I think at the same time I thought, well, we just went through this kind of really unbelievable event and my body, I'm sure, is reacting to stress, and that's got to be a big part of what's going on. And so I, just sort of dealt with it. And at the same time as I was dealing with the bleeding, I was dealing with incredible pain. I sort of just had to just push that aside. And so the weeks continued on and the bleeding continued every day. I had been in communication with Pastor Doug about, the break-in and about we had had a prayer team come to our home and things like that. And he said, I think I want to have you go meet with Pastor Larry and Audrey for some prayer and some counseling. And so I thought that was a good idea, and I did that. And I think the first time I met with Pastor Larry and Audrey, I think I'd been bleeding for about 5 or 6 weeks straight. And I didn't bring it up in our session. For one thing, there was plenty of other things to cover. It's also just kind of an uncomfortable topic to talk to a stranger about. The bleeding continued, the pain continued. I had made a doctor's appointment, but I couldn't get in right away, and so it was several weeks later. Towards the end of July, I met with Pastor Larry and Pastor Audrey again. And at the end of it, I thought, I'm just going to speak up about this. At that point, it had been 8 weeks and 2 days of bleeding. And I thought, I'm going to ask for prayer about this because this is not sustainable. Right at the end, I brought it up and I said, hey, while we're praying, could you also pray for me about this situation? And so they did, and it was a really powerful prayer. I just had this moment, I think, where I just felt so much hope about, what would come from that. And as I was driving home, it was about a 10, 15-minute drive from their house to mine, the pain just started increasing, really worse than it had ever been. And I remember getting almost to my house and thinking, I had this thought like, well, that prayer didn't work. And just felt like, here we are. And so I got back home and my kids were there waiting for me, and it was lunchtime, and so I needed to get back into mom mode, and I went upstairs to change, and the pain, it just increased to a level that I couldn't handle. I'm gonna have to go to the emergency room. I've had 4 babies, and it was worse than the pain of childbirth. And so I knew something was really wrong. As I walked back into the bathroom, I was kind of doing like breathing through it and trying to get through it, and I actually tried not to faint because it was so extreme. I felt all this pressure, and I actually ended up passing. It looked like a tumor or a fibroid or something. It was not something normal that should come out of a person's body. It, of course, scared me because I didn't know what was happening. And then within probably 20 seconds of that happening, the bleeding and the pain stopped. It never came back, and that was it. And that was the end of July. And so about 10 days later, I think, was my appointment with my doctor. And I thought, well, surely I'll keep that appointment. And so I kind of explained to her what had happened. And of course, she didn't really have an explanation for it. And she said, well, let's go ahead and get an ultrasound anyway, just so we can make sure there's nothing going on. And so in 2021, I had been diagnosed with 2 like softball-sized fibroids in my uterus. And at that time, she had wanted me to have a hysterectomy, and I had declined having that. We fully expected that we would find 2 fibroids in my uterus because fibroids don't generally just disappear. And so about another week later, I had the ultrasound, and it was completely clear. No fibroids, no abnormalities, nothing problematic at all. And I think I knew in the moment that tumor or fibroid or whatever passed, and that pain and the bleeding stopped, I knew I had been healed. But I think because my faith had been so shaken in these past months from everything that had transpired, it wasn't until I got that ultrasound report and I was like, I have been healed. It's interesting to me, being a believer my whole life, it's interesting to me that it never even occurred to me to get prayer. Since then, I've really had to reflect on that and learn from what my expectations have been and what they should be. This has served as a reminder to me to, like, no matter what the circumstances, just to take it to God immediately and to go to those trusted people that can pray with you and agree with you for healing, and not to discount the power of that. I think going forward, as I think about how this healing impacted me, it just causes me to really think about, where do I go first when, something isn't going right, or I need healing, or there's sickness, or there's, just any of the things that we face in life. And I think, what I've learned from that is, like, just to take it to God first, and, that He is faithful, and that He is our great physician. My name is Sarah Timmer, and this is my story.